Hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative Live. It's a special edition tonight. It's Monday, October the 20th, and it's 7:03 p.m. We're a little bit late, but I wanted to get things going. We'll be joined by three amazing guests tonight. But before we get there, when 7 million Americans took to the streets this weekend protesting authoritarianism, they weren't the Hamas terrorists or the Antifa anarchists the administration had tried to paint them as. They were, in fact, people just like you and me, 40, 50 something year old Americans in their middle age, looking around asking, what's happened to my country? What happened to the American dream? How is it possible that for decades now we've lost the ability to own homes, guarantee our kids can own homes, guarantee our kids can even get jobs? In any normal circumstance, any normal president would say, I hear you, I share your concerns, let's work on a plan to make things better. But Trump does the opposite. He creates a meme showing himself literally shitting on America from fighter jets while wearing a crown. Now, the president isn't even being ironic in all of this. He is actually shitting on all of us. Trump doesn't care about Americans. He couldn't care less about our grievances. He intends to make himself king and rob you blind while he does it. Our mad, defecating king may not be afraid of the 7 million mild mannered Americans who marched on Saturday, but he is afraid of a secret lurking in his own closet, in his own shadow, as it were. And that secret has a name: Jeffrey Epstein. People ask me all the time, why does Jeffrey Epstein matter? Why are we still holding on to this case for so long? And here's the answer: it's because he's the origin story of how corruption took over American politics and finance. It's how your American dream was stolen, and you're still the one paying for it. Epstein wasn't a lone predator. He was part of a transnational criminal network that moved into the United States in the 1980s and started taking it apart piece by piece. We've watched this pattern repeat for 40 years. The 1987 crash, the 1999 dot-com bust, the 2008 meltdown, COVID, and onwards, so many of them. Each time, the same crew runs up the markets with products that don't exist or don't hold the value that they say it does. Then they crash the market. Then they buy the remnants at pennies on the dollar. And as if that weren't enough, they also then claim the bailout money. American taxpayers pay twice, and the thieves, they collect twice. Epstein's victim, Virginia Giuffre's posthumous book, Nobody's Girl, is out tomorrow, and it will hopefully reveal some of the details about Epstein's blackmail operation. Now, we should understand what this blackmail operation really is. It's modeled on what Russia does. Basically, they hook you in with financial opportunity, and then to keep you in line, they use the leverage they have on you, compromising sex videos, whatever it is that they can have on you that embarrasses you or that'll keep you in line to do exactly what the main bosses of their organized crime syndicates want them to do. Now, this was pretty much business as usual in Russia, but it came to America with Jeffrey Epstein and with Donald Trump. It didn't happen by accident. It happened by design. A full-scale corruption of American business that grew and grew and grew and has now infected the very top of our politics. People knew, by the way, and they not only let it happen, they funded it. JP Morgan, amongst other banks, paid for the Epstein victims up to $75 million in one case and $290 million in another. Deutsche Bank also paid $75 million. Those aren't charity donations, they're settlements, because these banks, often your banks with your money, enabled this criminal enterprise. Now the grift is crypto. American Bitcoin Corporation became public with Eric Trump and Donald Trump owning 20% of the holdings. The Trumps may have collected as much as $10 billion while they're cutting back Medicare and Medicaid for everyone else. This is the nature of this kind of corruption. Meanwhile, you're drowning. Federal debt just hit $38 trillion. Interest payments now rival core government spending. Housing is out of reach. The national price to income ratio is near historic highs, and median monthly ownership costs approximately $2,035 in 2024. That's what corruption does. It infects our systems. It runs massive multi-million dollar crimes on unsuspecting Americans. And when the thieves run away with the gains, you, America, are left holding the bill. And tonight we bring these stories together. In 15 minutes, we'll talk to William K. Black, who's the regulator who took down the SNL banks. That was during the quaint time not so long ago when accountability mattered. And we'll talk to Patrick Lovell, the executive producer of The Con, about the 2008 crash. But we're going to begin tonight with Ellie Leonard, who's a fantastic Substacker that she's been on our show before, and you all know her from the what is it, uh, the panicked.
Unpaid writer.
I knew I got it.
I gotta rebrand.
I can understand the feel. I certainly can understand the feel for a lot of
Yeah.
Americans these days who are facing the panic of trying to figure out what to do with their country and with their finances, as so much is being taken away from them. But I really wanted to talk to you about the work you've been doing around Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey
Mhm.
Epstein as we face the book tomorrow, the book release of Virginia Giuffre's posthumous book. It's called Nobody's Girl. And in it, we expect some really startling revelations about how Epstein operated. It's a very dark, dark, dark book, apparently. What have you heard about the book, firstly, and what are your expectations?
Well, I've been following Julie K. Brown, who is a reporter from the Miami Herald, and she's really great. She is someone who played a really huge role in kind of wrapping up the 2008 investigation into becoming the 2019 investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. And so she has played a really big role on behalf of journalism to putting someone behind bars. And so I take her work very highly. I follow her quite a bit. And she, of course, got an advance copy. Virginia knew her very well. And so I've just been kind of soaking up her tweets and different things that she's posting around about what expectations she has. And she did have a chance to read the book, and she said she was already in tears on the first page. And so I have a lot of expectations. I hope I don't have too many. You know what I mean? My hopes are always very high
Mm.
when something like this happens. Although I don't think we've had something quite like this before. Um, it's a moment when there it feels like there's nothing to lose as far as name dropping and just and saying who's who, and not calling them by their titles but calling them by their names, which is so important. I do know there was mention in the book about two billionaires, a billionaire couple who had participated in some of the sex acts against Virginia Giuffre. People were tweeting that this was still an unnamed couple, and Julie K. Brown popped in and said, "No, they're not. I wrote about them in my book," and I went up and looked them up, and it was indeed Glenn Dubin
Mm.
and Eva
So I thought it
Anderson.
was, yeah, makes
Yes.
sense.
And so I mean, that all wraps into kind of these Ghislaine Maxwell interviews and a lot of the, hours and hours and hours and hours that she sat in front of Todd Blanche and, let's be honest, lied her ass off.
Mm.
But all these stories kind of filter into this giant web of money and sexual trafficking and all these girls that just, I mean, I'm reading through some of these documents that were dropped earlier this week, and it's just like redacted, 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 but woman from Russia, woman from Belarus, woman from Ukraine, woman from Russia. And you know that these are all the girls that they were trafficking in, but they're just names and age redacted. So there's a
The
lot.
In the intro there, I tried to paint a picture of what I think this really looked like. You had people who are part of their business ecosystem, part of the criminal ecosystem that they were trying to build to make themselves fortunes of money as criminals, as organized criminals. And then on top of that, they had this control feature, which was the blackmail feature, which was we'll compromise you in situations that you're not aware of, or we'll compromise you in
Mhm.
situations where the girls are so young, you're actually committing a felony. We'll capture all that on video, and you'll be beholden to us for the rest of your careers to do everything we tell you to do, or in order to extract, as they did in Leon Black's case, millions and millions of dollars over the years. I mean, that to me is the thing that people are sort of missing about Jeffrey Epstein. There's a certain understanding of, yes, he was a sexual predator, yes, maybe he was a blackmailer, but they don't quite understand that what he was doing was protecting the bigger criminal syndicate that was busy
Yes.
gaining a lot of money out of the system, running up the stock markets, creating crises after crises, and holding politicians and business people to do whatever he wanted them to do based on the videotapes and the compromise that he had on them. And I
Right.
think that's missing from the story. And I hope to get some of that from Virginia Giuffre's book.
Right. I mean, and there's a lot of information that we do have. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is I'm going through the Black Book, which we've had for what, 5 years.
Yeah.
and vetting everybody. And it is hundreds and hundreds of people in finance. And like, I don't know why any one person would need to know hundreds of people who work for hedge funds and like different financial institutions. And that, you're right, that is the bigger picture of this. That's the thing that connects everybody is money. I'm reading through these new documents, and you start to hear things where you're just like, why was Jeffrey Epstein involved here? Why did they even need him? He's hanging out with Woody Allen all the time, and all of a sudden, all these directors and people are coming to Epstein's house to edit their films at his house. Like,
Mhm.
why? He has
Mhm.
nothing to do with films. He's working with the Treasury Department. Like, why? He doesn't work in the government. He shouldn't have anything to do with that. And you start to see the leverage he had in every angle of business and of entertainment and of journalism and fashion, which of course is a huge common denominator. And he just had his fingers everywhere. Academia, I mean, you're starting to hear all these things about like Martin Novak at Harvard. I mean, he was on like every flight manifest, and it's
Yeah.
like, why is this math teacher from Harvard flying back and forth to the island with Epstein? Who know, you know what I mean? Like, he was just everywhere.
And
And
that's such an important point you're making, because
yeah,
it tells people that, this is a very omnipotent crime syndicate that had its hooks into absolutely every sector. And if you're wondering why the media has been so complicit in Donald Trump's rise and protecting Donald Trump, well, that's the reason. If you're wondering why the banks for so many years did nothing, even though they knew it was happening, that's the reason. This is a sprawling operation that basically ran the underside of America for many, many decades, until
right.
it's absolutely taken over the presidency. And that is why
Hmm.
it's such a omnipotent force and so hard to tackle. And yet, I think that there's a lot of expectation, and I think you're right. I think it might be oversold in this book tomorrow, but there is a lot of expectation that between the Virginia Giuffre novel, or book at least, and her the release of these FBI files, that we will find along the way the truth of it all, that it will emerge, because it's so impossible to contain such a big, omnipotent force. Um, but of course, there's a lot of ifs there, and those ifs may not come true. We may never see
Right.
the Epstein files. Giuffre's book may not be as tell all a book as we expect it to be. How do you think Americans can understand this? How do you think Americans can learn about what it is that Epstein and Maxwell were doing, and how they're connected with Donald Trump? Is there enough in the zeitgeist already for
Mhm.
them to begin understanding it?
I always say that there is a quite a bit. They've given us quite a bit, but they haven't made it very public. It's kind of like every other complicated document that comes out of the White House. Like, you think Project 2025, you think the Big Beautiful Bill, you think of all these complicated documents that, yes, we have access to them, but they are made as complicated as possible and as hard to find as
Mm,
possible, so that they're right in front of us, but we can't see them. And so part of what I do is I try to read through, like, for the past few days, I've just been reading through, you know, like 500 pages a day of these kind of weird like flight manifests and all his scheduling emails and things like that, to sort of get a bigger picture and then simplify and put it all in one place so people can understand what's going on. Because I think the thing that I worry about is not so much will we figure out who's on the list, who did what, who committed crimes. We've had a lot of that already, and I think what we've seen in the past at least year is that it doesn't really matter if you have evidence and you have crimes, the consequences aren't there, or there are the right people in the way of those consequences to prevent you from facing any kind of jail time or felony conviction or whatever. I think the greatest consequence that we can give these people when there is evidence that they've actually done something is sort of like a societal response. Like, you think of Me Too and how many people, for better or for worse, how many people were canceled by the Me Too
mm,
movement because of the things that they did. And it wasn't the justice system. It wasn't other, I mean, you think Weinstein, yes, but like, there was a
yeah.
greater crowd of these kind of sexually deviant people of power, that society took into their own hands and said, we're done with you. And you think of Woody Allen and not being able to make movies in America anymore. That was because of society. That wasn't a justice system choice. That was people's response to the things that he did. And so I think when we start to get things like Virginia's book and we start to get things like these files, it's, within reason, it's up to America to provide those consequences for the people in power because the justice system just isn't doing it anymore.
I love what you're saying about consequences, and I think it ties into our next segment. I think what Americans are fed up with is that people seem to be getting away with murder and crime, and there's just no stopping them. There's no accountability for the fact that Donald Trump can literally be shitting on America and put out a meme that is so offensive for any president to do anything like that and not give a damn because he knows he's got no accountability. No one's going to stop
Mhm.
him. And I think what we'll see in the next segment when we talk to Patrick and Bill is that for up until the 1987 crisis, there was accountability. There was a
Mhm.
thousand bankers that were put away during the savings and loans crisis. But by the time 2008 came around, no one was put away for the crimes of the crash of
Right.
2008. And now look at the impunity with which this government is running its shop. It's just doing whatever it does. But the other part of what I really liked is this idea of like a Me Too movement to shame the Epstein network.
Right.
They are terrified of exposure, and we know who they are. And
Mhm.
maybe it's time for if the Justice Department isn't going to do its thing, maybe it's something that we can do
Mhm.
as citizens and begin to name and shame a lot of the people who are responsible for this horrific set of crimes. And
Mhm.
with that in mind, I want to share with everyone the great work that you do at
Okay.
the Panic's Unpaid Writer, because you have taken upon yourself to transcribe a lot of the stuff that people have taken for granted because we've seen it in other people's reports, so we've assumed
Mhm.
that they are telling the story in the right way. And yet, because you've taken the time to transcribe these things and develop them, you've been able to discover so much new information that we haven't been able to get from anywhere else. So tell people about the Panicked Unpaid Writer and what they can get if they subscribe
Sure.
to your Substack, and where they can get all this great detail that you've been able to unpack.
Sure. Okay. So I am Ellie Leonard. You can look me up as Ellie Leonard, or you can look up the Panicked Unpaid Writer. I do a lot of writing, obviously, about the Epstein stuff. I've written about Virginia Giuffre. I've written about the Farmer Sisters. Um, I generally, I generally pull the information that I'm getting from older articles and older documents and things that people just assume are already out there. We must know everything. I never assume that. I always assume things are missed. I went through the Epstein birthday book, the 50th birthday book. I transcribed everything because I'm a transcriber. That's the work I do. That's my side hustle. So I transcribed all the handwritten letters, and there was a lot of information. You and I found some very very interesting tidbits in that
Mm.
book that kind of changed the course of Epstein history a little bit, at least for us. And so I do a lot of deep dives. Like I said, I'm vetting the Black Book. I'm going through, there's something, I don't know, 4 or 5 thousand pages that they gave us last week that I'm going through a
It's a
page at
lot.
a time.
A lot of
It's a
it
lot.
shared a lot of new information just recently, and
Yes.
there is a lot to get through there. I've been trying as well, but
Yeah.
you're making some great headway. Any big headlines from that so far?
It's a lot of like who's popping up over and over and over again. So you're
Mhm.
seeing Woody Allen over and over. Like they were buddies. They hung out
Mm.
quite a lot. Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, is all over those flight logs. And these are new flight logs. These are not the flight logs that we've had that kind of stopped around. I think they stopped around 2013 before, but we had no passengers listed after like 2006. They were
Wow.
just question marks. So this is filling in a lot of those passengers. It also lists all the women that were flying to and from the island, and it doesn't list their names, it doesn't list their birth dates, but it lists the country of origin, and it's Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. It's all these countries, Slavic countries, where he was very often getting the girls that had a different age of consent, where he was paying for them to come have modeling careers. So you see these popping up over and over and over again. You see Ken Starr on his plane. You just see all these same names again. You see Martin Novak, who's professor of math at Harvard, and like, and he is. I don't know if specifically he is brought up in Virginia Giuffre's novel, but she talks about the head of the psychology department participating in some of this stuff, and I do know who the head of the psychology department is. You can just Google it from that time period. And Epstein paid a lot of money into the school, but I will say I interviewed a student who was there in that department at that time, and he said he had a donation plan set up, but he never actually followed through with it. He never actually paid very much into it. So he had his key card, he had his position on campus,
Mm.
but it was kind of like, I am going to make this donation, but he never really followed through with it.
Yeah, it's very Jeffrey Epstein to have tried
Yeah.
to come up with a scheme that he didn't fulfill. But it is true. He had an
Yeah.
office there, though, apparently. He didn't use it
For
that much.
years till
Yeah,
he died, he had an
yeah,
office
yeah.
there, which is wild. So anyway, there's just I put all of this together so that there's like simplified documents, simplified articles that sort of highlight things, give you links so that you can go and look at the resources and the quotes and the citations, and just I make it available for the every reader. It's not academic, it's not complicated. I just want people to know I always put things victim first, survivor first. I put things in a way that honors the women who've been brave enough to come forward and tell their stories. And I mean, you can't say you enjoy writing about this stuff because it's pretty heinous, but it's like a giant puzzle. And I really love the investigative side of things, and that I can actually have some small part in making this happen maybe over time. And I think all of us together could make this happen if the government's not going to do it.
Ellie Leonard from the Panicked Unpaid Writer. You do incredible work. I highly
Thank
recommend her
you.
Substack. Everyone should really subscribe to it and make it a paid subscription because she deserves it. She puts in so much work. So
Yep.
check out what she does. And Ellie, will have you back on the show soon. We'll talk about all
Okay.
sorts of things related to Jeffrey Epstein. Have a great day.
You too. Talk to you guys later.
Bye. Which brings us to these two fine gentlemen here. On the very far right, you've met Patrick Lovell before. He's the executive producer of The Con. And in the middle, William K. Black, who says he can't hear me right now. That might be because you might need headphones, or you might need to turn up the volume on your app there. But headphones may help. Can you speak to us and say if you can hear us?
Test. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Patrick. Why don't I start
Okay.
with you, Patrick, while Bill is trying to figure out his audio there. You've been on the show before. You've described so many interesting things about the con before. But this weekend at No Kings, you had the opportunity to be a keynote speaker at the Salt Lake City No Kings protest, which was a very well attended protest. Tell me a little bit about what it was that you felt when you stood up there, and also what it was you were telling everybody.
Well, first, I want to say thank you for having us on again. And boy, was I riveted by Ellie Leonard. She was really something
It's
there. And I
fantastic.
love that information.
Yeah.
Can't wait to look more into it. But in terms of my experience, man, I got up to the podium and I had spoken at the No Kings rally back in June. And I think we had probably 7,000 to 10,000 at that particular event. I think there were 20,000 people on Saturday. And it was glorious. It was absolutely glorious. And what was really cool about the timing for me was we were able to, with our guest here, who's been my mentor for now years and years and years, we've had the opportunity to really get a lot more detailed about a new plan that I was able to, fortunately, get that out to the No Kings rally. But I got to tell you, I was trying desperately to try to get in touch with Ezra Klein and Leah Greenberg, who are the two key, let's just say, the senior leaders of the Indivisible national group. They're located on the Beltway. We see Ezra frequently on Rachel Maddow and so forth. And I'm connected to some senior folks, right? But we know that they were dealing with a lot of, shall we say, worrisome goings on of the reaction from the Trump administration and everything that was going into it. I mean, I don't know if we all expected ICE to show up or the National Guard or some variation. I mean, there was a lot of, I'd say, worried people, but it went very well where we were, and everything went off without a hitch, and it was magnificent. And I had the opportunity to give, really, quite frankly, a speech of a lifetime. Thank you to Bill Black, who gave me so much information ahead of time. And the timing was, quite frankly, amazing, because last night, as a result of what I introduced on Saturday, it was amazing because 60 Minutes did a fantastic feature with one of the whistleblowers from the Government Accountability Project, of which we are involved with, that I was able to roll out. That's part of the New Untouchables initiative. That is really the only answer that we can turn the tables on this monstrosity.
Let me pause you there, because I think we're going to a lot of territories, and we'll go back to it in a second, because that 60-minute story was really remarkable. But, just to set the scene for everybody, when we spoke last time, we spoke about how No Kings was going to be a very a big event. 7 million people showed up, but was there going to be any substance to it? And then you've introduced me to Bill Black, and you've told me a little bit about the new Untouchables that you've been doing. And Bill, for everyone to know, is one of the regulators, if not the regulator, who helped bring to justice 1,000 bankers involved in the SNL crisis back in 1987. That was at a time when accountability was a thing. When you committed a crime, imagine that you'd actually be accountable. You might even be facing a sentence of some sort. That's the last time that happened. In 2008, when we had the same crash or similar crash, we didn't get anyone going to prison for that. And Bill, that is a one way of saying that we've lost our ability to be accountable, to put the criminals into account, and that we've lost our ability to hold them accountable. And that, the more I think about it, the more I think that is the very core of the problem, is that we are allowing corruption to run away and rampant way through our society and business and government. And it's people like you that can help us put us back together. So riff on that for a little bit.
Sure. As a friendly amendment, I would say it isn't that we've lost accountability as we've reversed it. Now, the only way to the top levels of power in the Trump administration is to be a criminal.
Right.
Is to be willing to lie and to have the thing that really aces your credentials is to have a criminal conviction. And a criminal conviction both for fraud and often for some kind of sexual sleazy stuff of the blackmail that you were talking about earlier in the program.
Thank you for making that connection to the blackmail, because I've been trying to connect the stories for everybody. I think Jeffrey Epstein is the origin story of a lot of where what we're dealing with now, because it's that blackmail thinking, that kind of, I will only let you be a part of my business enterprise, my corrupt business enterprise, if I have some dirt on you that I can control you with later on, that has created this animal in US politics, which is exactly the one you described, as a criminal on the one hand and a sexual deviant on the other hand.
Well, let me put my criminology hat on and say this is absolutely normal, right? You have a problem in recruiting crooks, right? Mm-hmm. And you want them to demonstrate something that gives you leverage over them. Mm-hmm. Then they'll be loyal lieutenants. So it's very common, for example, in a gang to be beaten into the gang. Right, you have to be beaten up by the rest of the gang members to the point that you're hospitalized to demonstrate you're not, like an honest person trying to get in undercover. Or another variant of it, this is the concept of a made man in La Cosa Nostra, is you have to kill somebody.
Right.
Right. So these are very old mechanisms that are done to verify you are as sleazy as I hope. Now think of the President of the United States using those same techniques, because almost certainly they were used on him early by Epstein and others
who Russians
who have compromised on him. And he knows how effective it worked on him. So he's adopted the tactics of his mentors that recruited him into these enterprises. And remember who his first mentor was. It's not his father. It is the sleaziest lawyer in America. And a man who pulled off working for, of course, the most notorious senator in modern American history, a drunk, where he was hard right wing and involved in sexual scandal of trying to coerce the army to get him closer to his gay lover, who was an enlisted type, right? And from that background, which you might think would make it difficult for you to do other things in life, he not only prospered for the rest of his career, but switched over to largely Democratic sleaze instead of Republican sleaze in the form of New York. And that is the man that Trump openly says
taught him everything he knows.
His understanding of how to approach business and controversy with impunity from the laws.
And today, I mean, it's one thing having that in a society, every society has their mobs, every society has their criminal elements. That's one thing. To have it grow in the way it has, to take over the presidency, to have it consume political parties, both of them, frankly, not no, both of them are guilty, not as maybe as much as each other, but there is so much corruption in the system itself that you've got, and the banking system and all of that. To have it consume the entire society is about the most existential crisis a society can have.
Right. This is what my research and unfortunately much of my life experience as a financial regulator was all about. What are the most elite criminals, the predators, right? They are the CEOs or they are the counterparts in government. And it's simple to form predatory networks. You don't even have to pay for it. Your corporation pays all the fees. So just go back to the great financial crisis. You had absolutely insane stuff in which the worst, the most radioactive mortgages were packaged that were not even single C, which is the lowest possible rating, right? Mm-hmm. And every single time they were put in these collateralized debt obligations, the neutron bombs, they got a AAA from all of the big three credit rating agencies. Not a single time did any say no. Well, why? Because if you say no, you're out. And you make money by giving favorable ratings.
Right.
Every single one of them got a clean opinion, and every single case, they went to a top-tier audit firm. Why? Because if you're a partner in those firms and you want to progress, the way you do is bring in a whale, a giant client, and you have to deliver a clean opinion because that's the reputation. The reputation becomes perverse. And so in the Trump administration, they have an easy screening device. Are you willing to say out loud, as if you believed it, an obvious lie? That the folks that attacked the Capitol were misunderstood patriots who were just sort of walking on a field trip and they were suddenly attacked by hundreds of DC police. Now, every single person in the Trump administration knows that it's a lie. That isn't the point.
The point is, can you repeat it?
Are you willing to repeat it and not have break up? When you're telling that lie, because then you'll tell every other lie, and that's why the whistleblowers, and that's why the show that you've been discussing, the documentary, is so critical. There are people who know that the top person wants them to lie, know that they will destroy your career unless you lie, and still look them in the face and say, no, hell no. And I will not be silent. I will tell the public. America has a unique advantage. We have more whistleblowers than the rest of the world combined. Something sort of weird about Americans, where not most people, it's a tiny percentage of folks, but it's far more than elsewhere. And so instead of, as you say, listening to the losers, the people that have shown cowardice, that have bent the knee or stayed silent, which is to say, much of the leadership of the Democratic Party and the entire leadership of the Republican Party, why not take advantage in a good way of the people who have demonstrated that they're honest, demonstrated that they love America, demonstrated that they cannot be intimidated, demonstrated that they believe in the truth. The whistleblowers. You saw, everyone who saw that 60 Minutes, how effective it is. And people like me one of my hats is, former trial lawyer. We don't go in and say, here's a fact, here's another fact, here's a statistic. Everybody's asleep. You tell a story. What do you do? Zev.
Mhm.
I'm not, you tell a story, you know how to deal with human beings and bring out what it is. What is their story? Why is it important? With whistleblowers, it's pretty darn obvious, what the story is, because so they not only get to expose corruption, they can give you firsthand testimony that this happened. Not a guess, they were actually witnesses to it. They can, in many cases, bring the documents. They already have the documents. So when the administration folks try to lie and say that never happened, that's stage two.
Mhm.
You roll out the document. You also know where the documents were that were destroyed. And there's often a record that those documents existed. And you're an expert in the field. So, for example, if it's the folks that destroyed FEMA in the United States, the Federal Emergency Management deals with crises, right?
Mhm.
Earthquakes, floods, things like that. They can explain that corruption isn't some weird esoteric thing. It means your daughter or granddaughter dies in a flood
Mhm.
in Texas, along with 80 other kids.
What you're describing is the power of truth, is the power of people exposing the reality of what the world is and how it flies in the face of what this administration does all the time, which is lie with impunity. And it's such a simple thing to think that truth can disarm evil and truth can disarm a regime like this, but that is in fact proven to be true. That is how these regimes are defeated, is through truth. Um,
And a friendly supplement.
yeah.
It isn't just that you're telling truth.
Mm,
As a whistleblower, you're speaking truth to power.
mhm, exactly.
And that's where it's most needed.
And Patrick, so back to this protest on the weekend, it seemed to me that there were 7 million people out there frustrated as anything with what's going on in their government, feeling unrepresented and feeling without really a solution or a voice or a meaning to go ahead with, whatever it is they were doing. They were there protesting, but it didn't seem like they knew why they were there, or that they knew they were opposed to the regime, but not what they were for. And it seems to me that you guys have come around an issue of corruption or anti-corruption, which is the thing that unites all Americans at this point, because there has been so much corruption that our dreams have been completely shattered, as you showed us in the movie The Con, or the series The Con. But the only thing that can bind us together now, and it's a powerful thing, is this notion that we want to end corruption.
Yeah, amen, Jeff. Look, I woke up this morning with your proclamation of your like almost media whistleblowing proclamation, right? Because of all of the things that CBS had suppressed based on your work, which was just outstanding. And then have that, I'd say dovetailed with Ellie Leonard, what she just said. But to your point about everything with regards to No Kings, first of all, I'd like to just for a moment address everybody who I'm reading your comments, and they're wonderful comments. You need to understand William K. Black is the equivalent of Michael Jordan, or if you're a hockey fan, Wayne Gretzky of criminology. He is
Go
maybe
Canadian,
the
go Canadians.
I know, I
George
know what
Carlin.
I know what William
George
K.
Carlin.
Black is. I
George,
know.
I know your audience, though. I'm telling
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
you mentioned it before.
yeah.
William K. Black and his team during the savings and loan crisis created 30,000 criminal referrals. They got 7,000 convictions. Okay, compared that to the great financial crisis when we did
Unbelievable.
our work, for example, and we got to the FBI, and Bill's jaw just about dropped when he saw the interview that I did with the former director of investigations of white collar fraud, third in command of the FBI, when he said there were zero criminal referrals during the 2008 great financial crisis, which was 180 times
Six. He said
There was
larger.
six.
six. There was
He
six.
said six eventually.
Oh wow.
Well, yeah, right. But we know that obviously one of the whistleblowers in the con was one of them. Obviously, Richard Bowen, right? So going back to the notion of what I was able to present to No Kings, and I said this, and it was truly remarkable. I said to the 20,000 people in front of me after the introduction, I said, "But who's got the plan requisite this corruption?" You could have heard a pin drop. And then I said, "Shout out your plan. tell me what your plan is. And I started to try to, goat the audience into like giving me their plan because I wanted to see what they had to say. And I got them to start rolling. But then what I was able to do from that point forward is we need to use the remaining remnants of our law based on this plan that Bill Black has created once again as the guy who's really the most ingenious aspect of our legal profession. He created a fight platform called, we call it the fight platform, which stands for to be fearlessly ingenious, good-hearted, honest, tenacious, to turn the tables, to create a flood the zone truth, to basically overcome this ocean of madness and lies that we're in the midst of. And so before I move forward, I'll just let you ask Bill what that means.
Bill, what does it mean?
So the great hope of the Democratic leadership and even of Indivisible is winning the midterm election for the House of Representatives at the federal level so that we could have subpoena power. Well, we have subpoena power now in more than 40 state legislators and every state AG controlled by a Democrat. Now, I'm not making this partisan. I'd be happy for the Republicans to do it, but we know they're not going to do so. So every one of these entities, and again, they have multiple committees with jurisdiction, could have been presenting the whistleblowers. Whistleblowers often can't testify because of non-disclosure agreements, because the company or the government that's doing the corruption will bankrupt them for violating the non-disclosure agreement. But if there's a subpoena from a state or federal legislature or a state or federal AG, that breaks the NDA. You can go forward and testify. So we have been working with the Government Accountability Project. Patrick, I imagine you've already explained how they're the preeminent entity for 40 plus years.
Yeah, please continue to explain that.
Okay, so again, my thing is elite corruption and CEOs, fraudster types. Whistleblowers are what they fear most. We have incredible credibility because everybody knows we destroyed our careers by coming forward. So you don't do it. You don't do it
lightly. It's one of those things you just do because you woke up feeling that way.
Type of thing. You only do it when it's really big. And the United States not only has large numbers of whistleblowers, it has large number of pretty senior whistleblowers. I'm not saying they're better people. I'm saying they know have more access. They were in direct conversation with the leaders who gave them the illegal orders. They know where the documents are buried. They know the document systems. They have respect through the chain. So many people will feed them information, even after they've left, because they know they're doing the right thing. So on top of that, they all have a story. And you present the narrative. And as I say, on top of that, they're experts, sort of by definition, in this field. And so the ones that are good at actually telling a story don't do and stuffy stuff. They explain what it is that was done wrong in plain English, and they explain what it's going to do to people, how people are going to lose their lives, how our system is going to go down. So we have this huge advantage. We're now 8 months in plus. Have you heard any of these hearings?
No, I've not heard any of these hearings, but I think what you're saying is that there is 2,000 of these people out there who are ready to testify publicly, and if they are called by his state legislatures.
And roughly 200 committees that can issue these subpoenas and attorney generals at any time. It doesn't require research type of
so
thing.
Why isn't it happening?
And let me just add then turn it over to folks like you. Turn it over to folks whose skill is talking to people and getting them to tell something important and interesting to an audience, and work with them, find which of the folks do the best, And because there are 2,000, already 2,000,
Unbelievable number, really.
and that number is growing enormously, we could have them in every congressional district in America. You don't have to wait for Democratic leaders, the gerontocracy, to
But why
do.
isn't it happening then? Why are we waiting? Why hasn't the state
Again,
legislatures done any
they
of this?
tell me that we're waiting so that we can do a subpoena, but I'm a lawyer. I've testified in front of 20 legislative bodies, including states. The states already have subpoena authority, and they have people who say they're Democrats. Again, happy to have Republicans do it. Just I'm kind of realistic. It ain't going to happen. But it would happen a year from now if you started this process. So get that story out. And again, it's a drumbeat. If it's a story and a story and a story, every occasionally Trump drowns it out. You know the technique of
They
how
just
they
gaslight everybody every day with whatever it is they decide to share with us. But why does it even have to go through legislatures? Why don't you just let them out here and let these stories be told?
I told you, because we don't want to bankrupt them through non-disclosure agreements.
The subpoena first, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Look, I think this is a terrific idea, but it also seems to be like one of those things that's a plan that we need to set in motion and needs to happen. But I don't know if Americans have the time or the patience for a lot of this stuff. It's one of those things where we're sort of letting autocracy just happen to us. We're letting it, the expression of sleepwalking into autocracy, because we're so overwhelmed by the lack of an alternative. There is nothing on the other side other than the anti-Trump world.
Well, but Sev, you're absolutely right. But why do people lose faith? Because, why has the Democratic leadership got a 16% approval rating on a good day, sometimes 12, right? They are the folks that have overwhelmingly failed to show courage, have not risen to the moment. What do you know with a whistleblower? They do have courage, right? They are willing to come forward, and they can get better and better with folks like you at connecting with that story. So you're right. Right now, there isn't a consistent message told in a narrative form. They're talking heads about statistics and such, from Democratic leaders when they can bestir themselves to do anything. How many hearings have they actually held? Shadow hearings.
It could be done at a national level, right? Shadow hearings.
They won't beat the non-disclosure agreement because you can't do the subpoena. But the Dems can do this, and they don't have to do the stupid formal hearing style, which are actually political events, right? So I can show my face and be heard and have a soundbite. They could have the way that we actually did something when we were super effective. And that was during the Great Depression.
I think the focus on, sorry, don't interrupt you, keep going.
So there, we didn't have the members of Congress, the hearing panel, do the questioning. We had a former judge who was a former prosecutor do the questioning. And his specialty wasn't banking, it was organized crime. So he held a hearing the way you, I think, would hold a hearing. Real questions to the real powerful people that were super embarrassing, where they were going to lie, and then you exposed the lie, and then you did it the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day of that drumbeat. When I was young, the Washington Post would do this, the drumbeats thing, where there'd be a story every day for 3 weeks, pounding somebody who had done something wrong. When's the last time you saw that in a major paper in the United States?
Just don't do that kind of thing anymore. It is important, just to pull a thread between what Elliot was saying earlier and what you're saying, that the people have a power as well, that we have a power to name and shame and expose just as much as the Justice Department has. Obviously they have different powers, but we still have power. And even just if there was an organized effort amongst the citizens to expose who the Epstein network was, well, that would be horrifying to a lot of the people inside the Epstein network. And we know who those names are to a large extent. We're aware of who they are. And they are the ones that are terrified of their names being exposed. Similarly, the stuff that these government accountability people, these whistleblowers, they have so much information and so much that would shock the average person if we could just get it out there. And I understand what you're saying in terms of the NDAs and all of that, but it might just be the quicker path to get it done is to just get it out there and let the NDAs fall where they may, maybe provide them with as much of a legal fund as you can.
So let me explain the law, folks. These don't go to, when you are purportedly violated an NDA, it doesn't go to the courts. It goes to the arbitration. And the arbiter panels literally are controlled by the corporations. So you don't get a hearing in front of the arbitrator. He issues an order bankrupting you that day.
Right.
So I, for example, as a whistleblower, was sued for $400 million in my personal capacity by Charles Keating, the most notorious of the frauds. The purpose was not simply to bankrupt me. It was to intimidate everyone more junior than me in the organization. Because, if they can take Black down, they can crush any of us.
Right.
So they want these opportunities to bankrupt very publicly top whistleblowers. We cannot give them that. That will do the opposite of what you were hoping. That will cause us to lose future whistleblowers, because even if you're willing to take them on, are you willing to bankrupt your family? Are you willing to lose the house, have your kids in a homeless condition in the United States? I mean, that's asking too much.
Yeah, it is asking a lot. Thank you for clarifying that.
Not a lot. It's asking too much.
Too much. We haven't got a minute or so left here, so let's just try pull this together in some way. But just describing, I think the movement that we saw showing up on the weekend, to me, was largely, there were middle-aged people. Like, they were not, like, I didn't see any, Hamas terrorists. I didn't see any Antifa extremists. I didn't see, these were sort of average middle class, middle-aged Americans, sort of walking through the streets very, very mild-manneredly and demanding some sort of change. But it seems to me that is just a small representative of the amount of people in that same demographic that must be so terrified of what is happening in this country right now that they were too scared to show up on the streets yesterday or on Saturday, and that there is a silent majority, if you will, that can really coalesce around this issue of anti-corruption and ending the corruption. If we can just get that message to them. Is there a person in our very vast anti-democratic movement here? Is there a person that you think could lead that movement?
Bada bing, bada boom. All right. Look, here's the thing, man. I'm going to tell you what my role in this whole thing is. Yeah. I'm a conduit, as I have been. I'm a journalist like you. I'm a producer like you. I had to go on the mission to discover Bill, because why? Because in the 2008 great financial crisis, the entire world didn't make sense. And I was a producer, and I started pulling the threads, and one thing led to another. I discovered Bill Black. When I discovered Bill Black, I discovered, to turn a phrase, the Mecca of truth. I was suddenly hearing what made sense based on the experience that I was experiencing that nobody else was talking about, because it was completely obfuscated. If you don't know what obfuscated means, that means they're hiding the truth. So I woke up this morning and I have Zev Shalev basically talking at the top of his lungs about this incredible information that he has as it relates to Epstein and how it destroyed his career. He's a whistleblower from inside the system as an executive producer of media, right? They suppressed this whole thing. After I went on a journey that took years and thousands of hours of research and millions of dollars to accomplish, we got quashed. We got quashed because all of the American people, first and foremost, all they buy are lies, just so you know. Truth is not something that people can fully understand. But second of all, the bottom line is there's not corollaries for it like there was when I grew up, right? The muckrakers, the truth tellers, the great independent film, the great independent documentaries, those that gave us into insights into how things were going. It's been supplanted with what? dancing girls on the bar, football, this, that, and the other, which I love. Trust me, I'm a victim of it too. I watch plenty of that stuff. But when it comes to truth, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. There are systems in our country that have a process, the legal profession. And what's happened in the United States is that the American people have just stuck their head in the sand. They basically, I can't handle politics. And that's what the system depends on. They depend on people trying to tune out the noise, trying to hide from uncomfortable truths, and actually dealing with themselves, quite frankly. How many people in our country were getting involved with liar's loans, for example? Hey, it works for a little while until it doesn't, and then it blows up, and then most people really don't care about anything until it happens to them. I guess what Trump is doing that I think I'm really grateful for is he's made it so horrific that nobody can ignore it. So the people that were working at the Department of Education, the people that were working at NOLA, the people that were working at NASA, the people that were this, that, and the other across the board, they cannot ignore this anymore. They were to work. I don't want to put it on them like they, have their blinders on. But there's so many people that are victims of what's going on at the moment, and it's getting substantially worse. But what we can all see is that this is an administration of goons. The lies are so unbelievably pathetic. They're cartoon villains that are nothing to be afraid of. And so when people discover Bill Black, like I've seen in the comments here, it's like there's this eureka. It's like what happened to me when I first discovered Bill. How did I first discover Bill? Well, I happened to be channel surfing on a Sunday morning, and I came across this television show on PBS called with Bill Moyers, the late, great Bill Moyers. And suddenly I started listening, and the next thing I know, 20, 30 minutes later, I was like, my God, you've got to be kidding me. And that's what Bill Black does. And we're not just with Bill Black. His wife is unbelievable. June Carbone, who's one of the greatest legal experts in the country. We've got Peltier, the former director of the Department of Justice, white collar fraud division. This guy was involved with, breaking up La Cosa Nostra. He was involved with WorldCom and Enron and all of this and all of these other things. And we got Mark Dan, who got the only RICO conviction in the entirety of the 2008 great financial crisis. That's why we call these guys the new untouchables, right? And what we're trying to do is to get millions of you that are looking in these, these comments and so forth, to get activated, to discover the information that we're putting out there so that we can turn the tables on this unbelievable monstrosity of lies, and we'll basically win, because truth always wins.
Truth always does win. And go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Zev, let me take on your question more directly as well. You are correct that it was the combination of me being a whistleblower and having senior position that I was an enforcement director. I was a litigation director. I was part of a communal ownership leadership team that was all committed, or subsets that were committed. And so I could help direct 1,000 examiners to look at things. I don't know of anyone comparable in that situation. In other words, I'm not bragging about me personally. I'm just saying that position of authority where I could act doesn't exist. So it would be a state attorney general. State attorney generals can act. We have roughly 20 Democratic state AGs. I would suggest that that's where the leadership could come from.
Some are very impressive.
Mark Dan is a former state attorney general and part of the group. Now, state attorney generals are also kind of politicians in many states. So it's not going to be everyone. It may be a tiny section of the state AGs, but we will tell you, and the con documents this: the folks that tried to be heroes and prevent great financial crisis obviously did not succeed because of federal government deliberately blocking their efforts through what a doctrine called preemption. Were the state attorney generals like Mark Dan and his counterparts, and a colleague of my spouse at University of Minnesota Law School, who was also interviewed in the con and has a great Louisiana accent, explaining in Cajun exactly what happened.
I mean, there's clearly an awakening happening, and it's an awakening about the crime and the corruption that has been, endemic in our system and has really taken over our system for the last 50 years, as you guys have described in the con, which everyone can, by the way, see at thecon.tv for free. It's five very interesting and intriguing episodes of how the 2008 crisis happened, and everyone should check it out because it tells you how little accountability there was from that crisis and how the bill from that, the extraordinary $71 trillion bill, is being paid by you, America. It's not being paid by anybody else. There was no accountability, and yet you're paying the price for these incredible crimes. And the more people wake up to those crimes, the more people wake up to the criminality that's taken over our entire system, the more likely we are to see what Bill and Patrick are devising here succeed. We need to have people in a public way turn to their AGs, turn to their state legislatures and their representatives and demand that these things happen. And it can start as early as tomorrow. Everyone can call their representatives in their state legislatures and demand that some of these whistleblowers get given a hearing, that we have hearings about the criminality currently going on in our administration. And that's something that every citizen, every one of those 7 million people, plus the silent majority at home, can still do with relative safety and get it done while this administration is still trying to cement its authoritarianism. So I commend you both for your work, gentlemen. Thank you for being here tonight. We shall do this again in the future. I'll let you close with whatever you guys want to say, if you want to promote anything or if you want to share any thoughts. I'll start with you, Bill.
Yeah, I want to talk directly to your audience. Social media did not exist when I was doing my thing. I had to try to do it through formal media. And I spent literally thousands of hours trying to get reporters to actually report. And there was, a success rate about 1 in 15 that would actually be willing to do the work and learn the stuff and actually get it right. But now we can reach people in a way that we never could during the savings and loan debacle. And folks like you and your audience are the keys to our ability to succeed. So thank you for listening to us. And we do ask you to act on it. You can make an enormous difference. And Donald Trump is a threat to the survival, not just of the United States and democracy, but to the world. This man is as dangerous a villain. I know he's cartoonish, but he's dangerously evil.
Couldn't have said it better. Well done, Bill. Thanks for sharing that. Patrick?
Bill always reinforces to me to understand that white collar fraud isn't something that doesn't hurt people. In fact, it maims and kills more people than any other crime that exists. It's monumentally larger than the made up crime that obviously has, Trump trying to get MAGA fearful. And that's why we've deployed ICE and so forth in our streets. Further, Bill taught me a long time ago that it's not necessary to hope to persevere, and that this is a righteous grind that you have to do every single day. Now, you and I both know, Zev, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate you, not only hosting us, but just the work you do is just extraordinary. And I look forward to more working together. But what we have to understand is that we've seen more media consolidation over the last 6 months than at any time in our history. And to put that into perspective, the last 20 years, we've had hedge funds and private equity funds buy up all of media. What we've just seen in the last 2 months, especially what we've just seen now at your former employer, CBS, of course. Are you kidding me? Larry Ellison, whose largest client with Oracle was the CIA for however long, and then we've got him owning Paramount, and ultimately now they're going to buy Max, which is media consolidation, which is state-run media, which is obviously what we see in Russia, right? This is happening in the United States of America, which is insane because the tall building law firms capitulated, all of media has capitulated, everybody in government has capitulated. So what's left? People like us, Zev, you, me, Bill, and our team, and so forth. So I'll just say in passing, please, everyone that's out there, write this down, right? Patrick Lovell, Truth Bombs the Con. You can see my YouTube page. We've got all that information there. More importantly, please check out the new untouchables. Now, the blueprint of all of this stuff, like you said, is the con, which is built on Bill's work and his direction and guidance, 5-part series, which is half of what we have, which is a story that affected literally 100 million plus people, that cost this country tens of trillions of dollars. And like you said, we were quashed because the system depends on you not knowing it. So if that pisses you off, please stop waiting for somebody to save the day. The ball is in your hands. We've got the truth. All you got to do is share it.
Patrick Lovell, the executive producer of The Con, and William K. Black, who's I can think they can find you under the new Untouchables now. Is that right, Bill, or is there a better place to find you?
No, that's great. If I can leave with 10 seconds of hope.
Go for it.
I'm wearing this Danish shirt because October 1943 was one of those small miracles in life where, because of a tip from a German to the Danes, they were able to evacuate nearly all the Danish Jews to Sweden. And, compared to the Shoah scale, the Shoah is small, but every life matters. And it would have seemed impossible for the Danes and the Swedes to agree to this in those era. You can persevere.
What a great way to end the show. Pay attention, folks. This is your future we're talking about. We can identify the network. We can follow the money. And with all of that, we can tell the truth and break the cycle. Thank you for being here on Narrative tonight. And thank you, gentlemen, for all the work that you do in your service. We'll be back on tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with another edition of Narrative Live. Have a good night, everyone.